Hey, this is Mike Robbins. Thanks so much for joining me for this episode of the podcast. Hope you're doing well, you, your family, your team, everyone around you. I want to talk today a bit about the paradox of success and fulfillment. And there's a couple of interviews that I watched and listened to over the past few days that got me thinking about this. The first was with a golfer named Scotty Scheffler. Now, if you're familiar with the world of golf, Scotty Scheffler is one of the best golfers in the world. He just won the British Open, and this interview actually happened during the British Open. I'm not even a huge golf fan. I don't follow it that closely, even though I'm a big sports fan. But I think it was after the third round, and he was leading, and he got to talking in the post-game press room just about the fact that golf isn't that fulfilling. And it was an interesting thing for him to say. And he was talking about, here he's won some of the major tournaments. Again, he's, I think, the number one golfer in the world and definitely one of the best these days. But he was basically saying, like, I'm not here to inspire the next generation of golfers or tell people to go win golf tournaments. He goes, basically, I'm paraphrasing, golf isn't all that fulfilling, or the obsession with winning golf tournaments in and of itself isn't fulfilling. It's not like what really, you know, brings joy to my heart and my soul. And, he was just sort of talking about perspective. And, look, there was a lot of chatter online about it. People had a lot of reactions. Some people thought it was a great message. Other people thought it was a bit bizarre or weird to hear a professional athlete who's so successful and, seems somewhat like most professional athletes, obsessed with high level achievement, kind of talking about, well, it's not really about winning. It's just about, life's about more than just winning golf tournaments. And I found it interesting. I mean, I've loved it and thought it was great because we don't normally hear competitive athletes at the highest elite level talk about this. And, as a former competitive athlete myself, now baseball is obviously very different than golf. I did get a chance to play in college and professionally for a few years before I got hurt, not anywhere close to number one in the world as Scotty Scheffler is on the PGA Tour. But, I grappled with this a lot as an athlete, like super focused on personal success and team success and outcome and achievement. And then also at times, he was talking about winning a golf tournament, and it's like exciting for a few minutes. You get to like hug your spouse and your kids and celebrate and raise the trophy. And then it's kind of like, okay, what's next? And again, I don't have that personal experience, but I would often have that experience winning and, just realizing like, okay, winning is fun and I'd rather win than lose. But at the end of the day, like, that's not all there is. There's more to life than just winning a baseball game or, in Scotty's case, a golf tournament. Now, there's another more cynical way to look at it is like, well, he's very successful. He's made a lot of money playing golf. He ended up going on to win the British Open, I think, the very next day. So it's like, okay, easy for you to talk about. It's not all about winning. It's not that fulfilling when you win, right? And I think a lot of us who don't have that type of elite success might say, people say, oh, money can't make you happy. And many people are still chasing money, either thinking it's going to make them happy or at least going, I want to find out for myself, And again, so there's some paradox here and some challenge, but I appreciate him saying that. And then another interview that I listened to just yesterday um, was on Oprah's podcast. And it was actually with my friend Raz Agrazi, who is the co-director of the Hoffman Institute, and he was talking about the Hoffman process, which is an incredible week-long personal growth workshop. And I happened to have the honor of doing the Hoffman process back at the end of 2016. Michelle, my wife, did it the beginning of 2017, and for each of us, it was profound, incredibly healing and transformational. As Oprah said during her interview with Raz, that it's been described as 10 years of therapy in a week, and I would definitely concur. It's one of the most transformational workshops, programs, experiences I've ever had in my life. Highly recommend it. I'll put a link in the show notes to the Hoffman Institute so you can check it out if you want to. A lot of focus on healing of family of origin and just making peace with your parents and compassion and healing negative and unhealthy patterns, really, really profound. But when Raz was talking to Oprah, he said something that I think I've heard him and others say before, but it really resonated with me that like life is often us trying to, climb to the top of the ladder, only getting to the top and realizing, wait a minute, the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. Um, and it just got me really thinking about this conundrum that I have found myself in for much of my life with obsessively focusing on success, thinking somewhat erroneously that success will lead to fulfillment. And look, I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, which that personality type, if you're familiar with the Enneagram, is all about achievement, accomplishment, you know, and I've had to grapple with my own obsession with external success. And living in the US, living in this Western world, living at this time in history, there's a lot of focus on external success that a lot of us have, whether we're our personality type lends to it like mine or not. Um, and I've learned many, many times over the years that it's not only is it not always the case, it's not often the case that our success leads to fulfillment. So, there's some things that make this challenging. Again, success is important. I'm not in any way poo-pooing success or saying we shouldn't strive to be successful or want to be successful individually, collectively. I just spoke at an event today in San Francisco for an association called Hardy and people in the HVAC industry. And I was literally talking to the leaders at this event about ways they could be more successful as leaders, ways their teams could be more successful. And that's what I'm often talking about when I'm speaking, when I'm coaching people. My interest is in some way, shape, or form of like wanting to help people enhance their success. I'm often looking for that myself. How do I enhance my own success personally, my teams, the people around me, our daughters, the people that I love? So there's nothing bad about accomplishments or accolades or, external success or even making money or whatever, fill in the blank. But I think it's important for us to define what does success really mean to us. And I think ultimately wanting to be successful while a noble pursuit, we're usually after something deeper, some level of satisfaction or ultimately fulfillment. And what is fulfillment? I mean, fulfillment's really about internal peace, joy, meaning, connection, making a difference in the world, impacting others. There's some sense of what does it mean to be fulfilled? And I don't think we talk nearly as much about fulfillment as we do success. I remember years ago hearing Tony Robbins talk about the science of achievement. So like learning ways to be successful, to achieve things individually, collectively, and then the art of fulfillment. And what Tony said, and this really resonated with me, was that like there's a science to achievement, so we can learn skills and ways to achieve more. But there's an art to fulfillment, which is less about doing and more about being. And it really is how do we embrace a deeper level of fulfillment? And Tony said, and I agree with him, that success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. And, I think most of us learn that in some painful ways throughout the course of our lives that, we strive for success only to either burn ourselves out in the process or not get there or get there and then realize, oops, I forgot to appreciate it. I wasn't enjoying the journey. I was missing out on my life and my relationships and the people that mattered. And it's hard. It's tricky, right? I mean, my origin story of what got me into speaking, if you've heard me speak before or you've read any of my books, I usually tell some version of this was basically like, I started playing baseball at 7, got drafted out of high school, didn't sign with the Yankees because I got to go to Stanford, signed with the Royals out of Stanford. 3 years into my pro career, still in the minor leagues, tore ligaments in my pitching arm, series of surgeries, baseball ends for me. And my big realization was like, oh, gosh, I was pretty good at this. This was fun. I just was so focused on the achievement and the end goal. I wasn't really appreciating myself or the process of doing it. And now it's gone. It's painful, painful way to learn an important lesson in life, right? Because success and fulfillment often don't arrive together or at the same time. And weirdly, we get so obsessed with success in our society, assuming that fulfillment will come from it. And often, unfortunately, it doesn't. And look, I mean, again, there's a lot of understandable reasons for this, but look, why does success often leave us wanting more? I think there's some cultural programming. We think achievement equals worth, right? We're chasing approval, recognition, some kind of security. There's that arrival fallacy, right? We think once we get there, we'll be satisfied. I was telling this story yesterday, and it's kind of an intense story from early in my life. But when I was 17 years old, the fall of my senior year in high school, I've been getting recruited by various colleges to go play baseball. And my number one school by far was Stanford. That's where I wanted to go. And I'd wanted to go to Stanford for like 10 years at this point. And I was fortunate enough to get recruited by Stanford. Went on a recruiting trip, was talking to them, was talking to a few other schools that I was interested in, but Stanford was far and away my number one choice. And I was waiting to hear back from them to see if I actually got into school. They reviewed my application, and if I got in, then I was going to go. They had recruited me, they wanted me to come play baseball. So I get a phone call from Coach Stotts at Stanford, who I've had here on the podcast, who's a dear friend and mentor of mine now and was my pitching coach at Stanford. But he called to let me know that I'd been accepted into school and they were basically offering me, a spot on the baseball team. I mean, this is November of 1991, my senior year of high school. I mean, it was the biggest accomplishment of my life up to that point, for sure. Um, the day I got that call, the morning I got that call, though, the night before, there had been a tragic accident, and one of my good friends and baseball teammates, Brody Summers, had been killed in a car accident. And it was awful, shocking, heartbreaking, hard to even imagine that it was true, it was real. And the first time in my life, I mean, there had been a little bit of loss and death around me of, people that I knew. Or a friend of mine's dad had passed away in seventh grade, and a couple other friends' parents had died, and grandparents and things like that. But I'd never lost a friend. I'd never had a peer, a contemporary that I knew that closely die. And we were all just shocked and devastated. And again, getting that call from Coach Stotts that morning was such a weird time to have this incredible achievement. And I was in the office at Skyline High School in Oakland with my best friend Asa as I took that call and got that great news. And I turned to Asa and we hugged each other, and he was so happy for me and proud of me and excited, as was I to some degree, although it was definitely muted by the shock of our grief of Brody's death just the night before. And I said to Asa, I don't want to tell anyone. And he kind of looked at me funny, and I said, not right now. It feels like insignificant in the face of this grief. And, it was, again, a really painful and sobering way to realize that, achievements are important, successes are important. Look, even as muted and emotionally complicated as that day was with respect to that, it was still a really big deal. I ultimately was incredibly proud and excited that I got into Stanford, that I got to play baseball there. It ended up being a wonderful experience for me that I'm still proud of all these years later. But again, juxtaposed to the loss of life, the sudden tragic loss of life of a, teenager with his whole life ahead of him, it put things in perspective. And while, you know, I didn't want that to happen, it was a pretty terrible thing to happen for all of us, and especially for Brody's family and the people really close to him. It was an important reminder, right? That hitting those milestones and accomplishing those things, as important as they are, there sometimes are things that are even more important. And the other thing that can happen, I can remember like the launch of my first book, Focus on the Good Stuff, almost 18 years ago, or like when we bought this house that we've now lived in for the last 9 years. Those moments feeling both exciting and thrilling and momentous, but also having that feeling of like, wait, what? This doesn't feel quite as good as I thought it would, or it didn't satiate that part of me that I thought would get satiated or fill that hole, or whatever the case may be. And I'm sure you've had this experience as well. And that's not to say that we don't go for the big accomplishments and we don't want the big goals. But I think sometimes we learn and then relearn, like, oh yeah, maybe it's not about that. Maybe it's not about just the milestone or the goal or the accomplishment in and of itself. And I've learned that so many different times in my life, again, as I'm sure you have. So, as we think about this and understand that there is this paradox, yes, we want to be successful. Yes, we want those achievements, those accomplishments, and there's nothing wrong with that. But remembering to have it in a healthy context, right? Fulfillment comes from being real, from really engaging in our lives right now, not from being perfect, not from just getting to the next level or the next rung or the next thing or whatever, right? Connecting with ourselves, connecting with the people around us, connecting with the people that we're in the on the journey with, so to speak. When I talk to my buddies that I played baseball with, again, we're all in our early 50s now. I guess there's a couple guys still in their late 40s, but we talk about life and we tell stories about the good old days when we were playing or whatever. It's like I don't miss, the games or the wins or I miss being with my teammates. I miss being on that journey, winning together, losing together, having those experiences. And again, if you think about some of your most important accomplishments, achievements, milestones, I imagine they were probably filled with mixed emotions, but it's probably more about the process of doing it or the people that you did it with, um, and starting to shift how we define success, how we think about success regarding fulfillment. Can we integrate purpose and presence and our values and maybe redefine it? And instead of focusing so much on what we want or what we're going to get, it's like, how do we grow or how can we impact, right? Again, that isn't necessarily what we're taught. And that's not the way that we tend to think about success and achievement. And again, I'm not saying don't focus on success or achievement. What I am saying is, what if we could prioritize fulfillment and trust that if we focus more on fulfillment, that the success will come more easily, more elegantly, more abundantly. So here are five things that we can do specifically to reorient ourselves, prioritize fulfillment, really understand more deeply this paradox with success and fulfillment and put it in an even healthier context. The first thing we can do is redefine success for ourselves, right? Like if success had nothing to do with money or status or achievement, what would it look like for me right now as an inquiry? What does it really mean for me to be successful? Again, I tend to, if I'm being really honest, often think of success in very limited ways. Numbers, accomplishments, achievements, money, things. And again, not that those things in and of themselves aren't important, but like, what if we expanded our aperture? I often say, like, the scoreboard isn't the game. The scoreboard is just telling a story about what's happening on the field, if you will, or the court, if we're using that metaphor of sports. So redefining success for yourself. What does it mean? What does it look like? What does it feel like? A second thing we can do is to kind of audit our level of fulfillment. We could ask ourselves on a regular basis, daily, weekly, what monthly, what energized me today, this week, this month? What drained me? Start noticing the difference between performing and being. Start noticing kind of what brings you joy, what brings you that sense of fulfillment, of inner peace and contentedness versus, now look, I live in the real world. There's things that I do that I don't love doing that are chores, that are work, that are, right? It's like not everything's going to be rainbows and unicorns all the time. That's not what this is about, but really looking at sort of can we in some way quantify or at least be more mindful of when do I feel more fulfilled and connected, engaged in that sense of joy and peace versus when am I just grinding it out and thinking that again the accomplishment is going to somehow bring with it feelings of fulfillment, which can happen but very infrequently happens in the way we think it's going to. A third thing we can do is to do like pick something every week or really focus on at least one thing per week to be aligned in terms of fulfillment. Like what's one small action you can take that really is something fulfilling for you, even if there's no tangible outcome to it. It just brings you joy. It just is fun. It's just interesting. It's just stimulating. It's just engaging. Like some examples would be like connecting with someone that you love or doing something creative or being of service or taking a break or going for a walk or listening to some music or something that again keeps you, it brings you into the present moment, brings us there, but like is really consciously deliberately focused on fulfillment specifically. A fourth thing is we could start a fulfillment journal or even write in a journal if you're a journaler like I am about things that bring you that sense of inner peace of fulfillment. Right? I have a gratitude slash self-compassion journal, as I've shared many times here on the show, where I write down three things I'm grateful for and three things I forgive myself for. I could add to that things that fulfilled me or things that are fulfilling me, or just write in my own journal, or have a separate thing you write down, or really take inventory. What's been fulfilling today, this week, this month? Like, again, putting more attention on it, noticing, oh, again, there's that science of achievement, my to-do list, all my actions, all my meetings, all my deliverables, all the things that like the work of that we do for the most part. If you run your own business, if you work for a big company, small company, if you're in sales, if you're working on technical or creative projects, there's lots of doingness and outcomes and things we're trying to achieve, of course. And then there's, goals, and we're looking at numbers and all the things. But what if we could start to pay more attention to the things that actually really bring us joy and create that sense of fulfillment? And then the fifth thing that we can do is to talk about it. Encourage conversations with teammates, with your right coworkers, people who report to you, people around you, people you work with, friends, loved ones. Like, what does success mean to you these days? How do you define that? How do you define fulfillment? What's fulfilling? Even talk about it. I think the more we talk about it, the more we can inquire into it, the more it can become real. I think oftentimes we're focused on success by default, right? It's again a cultural expectation. We don't even really think about what success actually means to us. And even if we define success for ourselves, taking that deeper step and really thinking about, wait, what does it mean and what does it actually look like and feel like when I'm fulfilled? And it's going to change throughout the course of our lives, right? For me at 51 years old, what fulfills me now is different than when I was 21. And I hope to live many more decades. And I'm assuming at 61 and 71 and 81 and 91, like different things will be fulfilling for me. I'll probably define success in a different way as well. And that's okay. That's part of life and growth and evolution. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. As always, I appreciate it. Um, there's some links in the show notes, both, as I mentioned, to the Hoffman Institute, so you can check out the Hoffman process if you're interested, as well as to that interview that Raz did with Oprah, which is great, and the interview, or at least the portion of the interview where Scotty Scheffler talked about his sort of take on golf and success and fulfillment, which all of which I found interesting. So check those out if you're interested. There's also links, of course, where you can connect with me on all the different social channels and platforms and learn more about me and my work. Best place to do that is at our website, which is mike-robbins.com. Make sure to hit the follow or subscribe button if you haven't already. And again, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep bringing your whole self to work and to life. And remember, we're all in this thing together.